This is the Bryan Hyde Show.
Well, hello there and welcome to the show. As every Tuesday morning goes, a lot has happened since the last time I spoke with Eric Peters from Eric Peters Autos. But Eric, here we are. And how are you today?
Well, I'm good. I've decided that I'm no longer listening to the Trump who cried wolf.
Uh-oh. This could be any number of things, but I'm going to have to ask for some clarification. What did he cry wolf on this time?
Well, exasperation. And it's not just Trump. I think I can use Trump here to make a general point about us constantly having to have our heads on a swivel, waking up every morning, wondering what the latest awful news is. And it just, as an old newsman or a middle-aged newsman, I can remember when we had what were called slow news days and even slow news weeks. In other words, nothing of any great import would happen for days and days and sometimes weeks on end. And that was what normal life was like once upon a time in the before time. Now, multiple catastrophes seem to be happening every single day, and we're being barraged by this stuff. And it's disorienting and it's distracting, which is what I think they want. I think they want to keep us in a state of perpetual anxiety so that we're unable to focus on any one particular thing and try to kind of figure it out. And if we can't figure it out, how do we deal with it? So, we've got Trump threatening annihilation of the Iranians one day, and then the next day, we're back on the table, we're negotiating, we're talking, we're going to have a deal real soon. And then, the very next day, the bombs are flying again. And this has happened, I think we're on the fourth time now.
Yeah, it is kind of hard to tell how things are going. And, I joked last week, and the chocolate ration has been increased to, 40 grams or whatever. But I get a real Orwellian feel. We've always been at war with East Asia. We've always been at war with Eurasia. And, I'm sorry, for some people whose sensibilities will be offended, but I don't trust our government's propaganda wing any more than I would trust the Iranian government's propaganda wing.
That's entirely reasonable. My God, if we didn't learn anything from the 4 years of COVID, then we've learned absolutely nothing. The authorities, the sacred, sacrosanct authorities have so utterly discredited themselves that in the absence of overwhelming evidence that we ought to believe them, we shouldn't believe them. Our default positions should be that they're lying. And it's ongoing. Look at this business with the dirty turtle. They keep telling us that, the dirty turtle is in rehab. What? He apparently can't somehow, he's capable of supposedly of signing things, which means it implies he's capable of reading things, which would mean he's capable of interacting, on a functional level. So why don't we see the dirty turtle? Why don't we have, he's done it before. Why don't we have video of him explaining to people, I had a little fall, but I'm okay. I'm getting better and I'll be back in Congress soon.
Did we not see something similar with Dianne Feinstein before she passed away, where, I don't know if this auto pen thing is just completely out of control, but the Biden presidency, we learn now after the fact, was largely run by auto pens, someone else signing as if they were Joe Biden. And even with Lindsey Graham's sister being appointed, there's just something so strange. It's like we have this political class and we must draw from only that political class for any legitimate leadership.
Well, and isn't it a criminal offense to sign a legal document in that manner? I mean, if somebody else were to affix my signature to a legal document that I hadn't actually signed with my own hand, that would be criminal fraud. And yet, when conducting the nation's business, we can have the supposed elected official who is exclusively the legal authority, who has the legal right to sign these documents, signing them with an auto pen. Why is that not a criminal offense? Why can't these people, at minimum, is it too much to ask? Too much to ask to have the guy actually sign the legislation that's going to be imposed on us?
And it's interesting, too, with the auto pen signed pardon that Dr. Fauci received, man, he sure wasn't willing to talk about much, was he, when he was in front of Congress?
Why should he be? It's just more of the unbelievable arrogance and sense of, and it's not a sense, it's a fact of immunity that this man has. I remember, some of the establishment pundits saying, well, we can get Fauci now. Biden's pardon means he'll just have to answer questions because he's been immunized. So he has to answer the questions. Ooh, I knew that was never going to happen. I knew that arrogant schmuck was going to get up there and do exactly what he did. And why wouldn't he? Because there's nothing that they're going to do about it. Rand Paul, I like Rand Paul, and he talks about looking into potential, judicial remedies. It's not going to happen. Nothing's going to happen. Everybody understands that nothing is going to happen. Just like everybody understands nothing's going to happen to Trump, nothing's going to happen to the Dirty Turtle staff. The point I'm getting at is that the people of this country, I think, have finally come to the realization that the whole rotten structure is lousy and needs to be bulldozed down, that there is no fixing this. It's not a couple of rotten bad apples at the bottom of the barrel. The bottom of the barrel has been punched out.
No, I completely agree. And, where do we go from here? Well, that remains to be seen. But in the meantime, life is coming at us fast. I was telling you off the air, we had, for little old Twin Falls, Idaho, to have a mass shooting take place. And this is something that strikes me as kind of strange. The authorities seem to very much slow drip whatever information they release on this. And I'm not accusing them of, trying to, we're just trying to get our stories straight and make sure we're all on the same page here. But it allows for speculation to run wild when they sit there and drag their feet. And, I'm not saying they should just put stuff out there, without concern for it being correct, but good heavens, the longer stuff like that drags on, and we know the name of the person, we don't know we can't confirm how many people have been killed or how many injured and so forth. It's I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's being done in the public's interest, I guess is how I would put it.
Don't you get the feeling that they regard us as kind of, at best, idiot children who have to be prevented from hearing the dread truth? Wait a minute, these people allegedly, we hear it all the time, they're public servants. They supposedly work for us. How is it that we're not entitled by right to know exactly what's going on when they're conducting the business in our name? This isn't an isolated incident either. Remember that? What was the tranny person that shot up that school in Tennessee? You remember that one?
Yes.
And
yep.
So they deliberately suppressed it. They deliberately suppressed what that person had written in the thing that they had. It wasn't, alleged, it might be. They actually had the physical document, that was written by this person. There was no contention about whether that person actually had written that document. It was accepted that was authentic, but we weren't allowed to know the contents of that document. What the heck? What is that all about?
And for what reason?
And another aspect, you and I touched on this a little before we went on the air. It's an example of how when seconds count, a cop is minutes away. And I'm not slamming cops. I'm just pointing out that they can't be everywhere. So in your Idaho shooting, it turned out that there happened to be a good citizen who actually had the means of self-defense available and took out this guy before the cops could even get there and deal with it.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is there's a lot of very careful wording to not give too much credit. Mere armed citizens. Why? We don't want to get the idea that that's the answer, but it's not being denied, but it's also kind of being downplayed a little bit. And yet I'm with you, Eric. When a deadly danger strikes, we don't know where or when that's going to be, but the people who have to deal with it are probably the ones there. And that's, this is not a call for, everybody should be a Rambo unto themselves. It's just having the training and the mindset to step up in the case of, a deadly threat. That's really on all of us. And kudos to the guy who was willing to answer it.
It is the answer, though, isn't it? Certainly our ruling elite thinks it's the answer. Do they ever go out without their armed guards all around them?
No, never.
Not. Look, I live in a rural area, and if some cretin barges into my house at 2:00 in the morning, it's on me, to deal with it. The crime historian will show up after a while, to take notes of whatever happened. But whether I live or die is going to be on me.
No, I hear you. And this is the other thing, too. I was talking about this with my son. The way that this has been reported, people are just kind of wallowing in fear right now. And I get the impression that someone benefits when we, sit there and just roll around in fear and remind ourselves, the world is so dangerous. And look what it happened right here where it's not supposed to happen. And I feel like there's some conditioning that's taking place there.
Oh, certainly. Absolutely. They don't want us feeling as if we have mastery over our own lives. And the fact is that in an area like your place, Idaho Falls, the odds of something like that happening are extraordinarily small. That's why you don't hear about those things happening in those areas or places like mine. And could it be congruent with the fact that in areas like where you are and where I am, pretty much you can safely assume that every third person that you encounter is carrying. That's a natural deterrent. There's a reason why you don't see mass shootings at police stations. You'd have to be an absolute imbecile to walk into a cop shop brandishing a gun because you're going to get ended. The same thing happens in areas where pretty much everybody or every other person is capable of defending themselves. And that makes you feel safe, inherently safe. It's kind of like, you and I are men, so we can understand that if you're a pretty decent sized guy and you can handle yourself, you're a lot less afraid than, say, an elderly person or a woman, going into a rough neighborhood or a sketchy bar, because we're more able to handle things. That's what these elites do not like. They don't want anybody, whether you're a man, woman, elderly person, whatever, feeling like you have mastery over your life, because they want to be the masters over all our lives.
Yeah, I've heard it said, and I agree with this. It's like they need us to remember how much we need them, but that's an illusion. And as soon as we figure out, well, really, I don't need them, suddenly the spell is broken. I mean, you see this anytime there's a government shutdown.
It's so fatuous, because at the end of the day, you care the most about your own well-being, and then the well-being of those in your circle, your family, the people who are dependent on you. You actually care about them. I think there's something really fatuous about the idea that some politician, especially some politician hundreds, if not thousands of miles away, cares about you. Even if they wanted to, which is silly, I think. It's just a stupid abstraction. They can't. How does a senator care for his millions of constituents? It's ludicrous.
Right. And does he hear their prayers at night? When they're praying? I mean, okay, maybe I won't take it there. So there was another thing I wanted to ask you about too. Oh shoot,
the president's another example of Trump's purblind political. People say he's got great political instincts. Well, I have to question that. You may have read about how he bragged about how he was going to stick taxpayers with the bill for 250 brand new Cadillac Escalades so that his entourage could look sharp driving around in these, $100,000 a piece Escalades, which probably are going to end up costing $150,000 each once they upgrade them with all the spiffy stuff that the governing class gets to have. And by the way, those things get about 15 miles per gallon. So but of course we're paying for the vehicles, we're paying for the gas. So while Trump is pursuing this stupid evil war that's making you and me pay for, at least in my area, $4.20 a gallon for gas, I don't care. I look good. My people look good. And just right in your face. It's just so egregious. I don't even have the words for it.
So I wonder if we're going to see, a return to balance come this November. And that's not to say the Democrats sweep everything. It feels like the political fortunes, nobody's got this locked in at this moment. Any thoughts on, have the Republicans, have they shot themselves in the foot for the coming midterms? Or
honestly, I don't think it matters anymore. I think we've passed a Rubicon. I think it's going to get worse, irrespective of whatever the elections are, because there's no longer anything that is restricting the corruption. We'll get a different iteration of it. It will be perhaps Democrats' corruption as opposed to Republicans' corruption. But there's nobody that's going to stand for principle any longer. There's nothing that's going to rein in the federal government anymore. It's going to get worse because it's necessarily going to get worse. Think of late stage Rome. Once you pass the Caligula threshold, you got the rest of the Roman emperors we're all familiar with. That's what we're going to get. And we're going to get it good and hard, unfortunately.
So here was another question that I had for you. This was actually from a listener. James had asked about when it comes to these flock cameras. Have you heard of, some people talk about these like anti-glare coatings and stuff. Does that kind of thing work? In other words, is there a spray-on kind of substance that you can use to basically defeat the flock camera as you're driving by?
Well, I don't advocate the destruction of private property, but I have heard that certain compounds have a tendency to result in the rendering opaque plastic materials. if they come into contact with those materials. Now, you could also just get a black garbage bag, and I'll say this because this doesn't entail actually destroying any property, and put the black plastic bag over the camera and get the message across. I've even thought about, I don't know how this would actually work, but taking a picture of, I don't know, a pig's rear end and putting it directly in the line of sight of the camera and leave it at that. This has got to stop. I just posted an article on my site about this idea that private corporations can use the government to take money out of your pocket and mine, to then turn around and buy a contract from Flock, which is a private corporation, or Axon, that's the other one, and put these stinking cameras up, which are then used to, not just monitor us, but to mulct us, to monetize us, to sell information about us to third parties, to be used against us by the state. It's absolutely outrageous, and it's got to stop. If I had it in my power, if I were a rich man, I would find out where Garrett, whatever his name is, Garrett Langley, I think is the dude's name, who's in charge of Flock. And how about let's mount some cameras all around the perimeter of his property, and maybe get somebody to follow him and his kids wherever they go with cameras, and then just upload the images and the video stream to whoever wants to have access to it. I don't think the dude would like that very much. Well, I don't like it either. I'm sure you don't like it. I think most people don't like it. It's got to stop.
Yeah, we've allowed the panopticon to be put in place all around us, and hardly anybody noticed. Now we're starting to notice, and we're told, "Oh, now simmer down. That's not a bad thing. Why, this is helping the police." But I was curious too. I've seen the claims for sprays or shields or things you can put over your license plate, but the idea being the camera can't really see it, but you could still see the plate unobscured to the naked eye, so it wouldn't raise flags.
I think it's incumbent upon us to fight back. One of the points that I made in my article is we were taught, I think we're still taught, to regard the Boston Tea Party during the American Revolutionary era as a great thing. American colonists finally had enough of the boot of the British government being put on their neck, and all these things are supposedly, that was heroic, that was good. Well, why is it not heroic also to resist this form of tyranny, which in my opinion is far worse? At least in the colonial era, you were dealing with the government of Great Britain, right? We're dealing with private companies that are leveraging the government against us. And I make the point in my article, I think it's valid, that there was a precedent for this when the government, when the insurance mafia, the car insurance mafia, leveraged the government to essentially coerce us into doing business with the insurance mafia, which is a for-profit business. The reason that we pay through the nose for car insurance is because they can force us to by threatening us with repercussions from the government. That was a horrific standard or precedent that was set. And now we're reaping the bitter fruit of that with these Flock cameras.
Here. And it's interesting to see the even local authorities, they do not like the criticism that comes with partnering with Flock. And, well, wait, who asked for these cameras, and why are there so many of them? And well, safety. It's all about safety, and that's all they can chant is this helps our police do their job. And even the language had shifted. Someone pointed this out last week at a city council meeting. The police chief testified, well, these cameras make it possible for me to police a population this size. Oh, is that what we're doing now? This is not about being a peace officer. It's not about, public safety so much as we're policing this many citizens in this area.
Yeah, and it just does it not occur to these people that even in the hypothetically best case scenario where it's only being used for good purposes, do they not grasp that it could be used for really awful purposes? And that is the danger. How are they going to prevent that from happening? And the answer is the only way to prevent it is to not allow it in the first place, period. And making their jobs easier is not the proper question. Their job should be hard, frankly, in my opinion. It should be hard to pursue a citizen. There should be a necessity of having to establish that you did something, or at least there's sound reason to believe that you did something. It's lazy to assume everybody is a criminal. Basically just to kind of put everybody into one basket of deplorables. We're all awful, so we're just going to watch all of you and track all of you all the time. Makes my job easier. I can just sit there and eat donuts and drink coffee. I don't actually have to go out, and look for things that are suspicious.
No, I think that's well said. And, again, we want to live in crime-free communities, but not at the expense of everybody being shackled preemptively, as if they were going to be a potential criminal.
Sure. I don't get it. Like pretty much everybody in any other context would deeply resent being watched all the time. I mean, the only people who are, who should be watched all the time are people in prison, violent criminals particularly, because they've given very good reason to merit being watched all the time. I haven't done anything to merit being watched all the time. Neither have you. Neither have most people. So get out of my face. Stop watching me all the time. Go do something else. Go get a criminal. Leave me alone.
How dare you? How dare you refuse the blessings of the political class that they're so eager to bestow on you?
To reiterate, I think if this were turned around, goose gander, right? I think it's a very easy way to understand this. These cops, the head of flock, if cameras were put in their houses, and their bathrooms, let's say, and everywhere they went, they had cameras on them, watching them, and the contents of the cameras were being uploaded somewhere, they would not like that. And if we said, "Oh, but it's for your safety, you might fall down in the bathroom, and nobody would know you're there. You might die. We have to have a camera in your bathroom." They'd say, "Get out of my face." Well, we should say, "Get out of our face," too.
Hear, hear. Eric, I'm with you on this. I'd like to subscribe to your newsletter. Oh, actually, that's something I can do. Again, talking with Eric Peters from Eric Peters Autos. I will encourage you, go to his website. I've got links in the show notes. And Eric, I'm sure we'll have more to talk about this time next week.
No doubt. Thank you as always for having me.
This is the Bryan Hyde Show.